Have you ever trusted a canine dog's instincts, even when logic told you not to? Imagine this. A canine dog refuses to move, scratching frantically at a concrete floor everyone else dismissed as ordinary. What if I told you that beneath those few inches of concrete lay the secret to solving a murder that had haunted a town for over a decade? Before we dive into today's unforgettable story, let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. And if you believe in the silent heroes among us, feel free to subscribe. Not because you have to, but because your presence means the world to us. The morning fog clung low to the cracked asphalt like a forgotten memory. Thick, cold, unmoving. Sarah Vera tightened her jacket as she stepped out of her department SUV, boots crunching against the gravel. Beside her, Ace, her loyal K9 dog, leapt lightly from the vehicle, his black and tan coat shimmering faintly under the dim light. His muscles were taut with anticipation, as if he sensed something the human eyes could not yet see. Before them loomed the abandoned warehouse, an iron giant swallowed by mist and silence. A faded no trespassing sign swung weakly in the breeze, its chain creaking, a sound that seemed louder than it should have been in the heavy stillness. Sarah glanced at her watch. 6:14 a.m., early even for a K9 unit call-out. Detective Alden Wraith's unmarked sedan slid into the lot, headlights slicing through the fog, dust and gravel whispering under his tires. He emerged with a steaming coffee in hand, face drawn tight by the cold and something more, a weight that clung to his shoulders. "No time to waste," he said, voice low. "Demolition starts Monday. If there's something here, this is our last chance." Ace stood perfectly still now, nose lifted slightly, ears rigid, tail held straight like a drawn bowstring. Sarah felt a pulse quicken in her chest, not from fear, but from an ancient instinct she had long learned to trust. "He feels it." She unclipped his leash with a quiet click. "Find it, Ace." The Belgian shepherd didn't hesitate. He moved like a shadow across the threshold of the warehouse, vanishing into the misty hollow, chasing something only he could hear or smell. Something buried, something waiting to be found. The warehouse swallowed them whole, steel bones and concrete skin stretching into shadow. Sarah moved carefully, boots brushing against scattered debris. Ace stayed glued to her side, nostrils twitching, muscles coiled under his sleek black and tan coat. Detective Alden Wraith trailed a few steps behind, his flashlight slicing thin beams through the swirling dust. The floor groaned under their weight, whispering secrets in a language only the abandoned could understand. "Looks dead empty," Alden muttered, his voice barely above a breath, as if afraid to disturb whatever slumbered here. But Sarah said nothing. She was watching Ace, and Ace had begun to change. The calm discipline of his search posture shifted, subtly, almost imperceptibly. His tail stiffened, his steps shortened, his breathing grew shallow, the rhythm stuttering like a heart about to break. Sarah felt her own pulse thud in her ears. "He's found something. He's locking on." Ace veered slightly, drawn not by sight but by scent, toward a large slab of concrete near the warehouse center. It looked ordinary, unremarkable, just another piece of forgotten flooring. Yet Ace halted, ears sharp, body tense. Then, the paw. A single paw pressed to the ground, trembling ever so slightly. Sarah knelt, heart hammering against her ribs. She pressed her fingers to the cold concrete. Nothing. And yet, Ace whined low in his throat, a sound of longing, of urgency, and began to scratch at the floor with frantic precision. One claw stroke, two, a rhythm of desperation. Alden stepped closer, brows furrowed. "Chemical spill," he offered weakly. Sarah shook her head. No chemical, no accident. Something, or someone, was calling from below. Ace's claws scraped in a steady rhythm, urgent, deliberate, almost mournful. Each stroke sent tiny puffs of dust swirling into the cold, stagnant air. Sarah pressed her hand lightly against his shoulders, feeling the taut muscles quiver beneath her palm. "Easy, boy," she whispered. But Ace wouldn't stop. Not until someone listened. Alden knelt beside them now, his breath misting in the chill. His skepticism faltered, replaced by a wary focus sharpened by instinct and years of too many wrong calls. "I don't like this," he muttered, fingers brushing the surface where Ace clawed. The concrete under their feet was wrong, smoother, paler, slightly raised, just enough to matter if you were looking close enough. Saris narrowed her eyes, noting the faint outline barely visible through layers of dust. A rectangle, maybe 4 feet long. Not a patch, not a repair, a grave. Ace suddenly paused, staring at her with burning certainty. Then, a soft whine as if pleading, "Here, please." Alden rose sharply, jaw tight. "We need a warrant," he said, but his voice lacked conviction now, ghosted by the undeniable presence pressing up from the earth beneath them. For a long moment no one moved. Only the sound of Ace's breathing, heavy, strained, filled the cavernous emptiness. Sarah stood slowly, brushing dust from her knees. Her decision was clear. "We're not walking away from this," she said, voice steady as stone. Ace wagged his tail once, a tiny thump of hope against the broken silence. Something waited beneath them, buried deep, breathing secrets into the concrete. And now finally someone had heard. The silence stretched, taut as wire, ready to snap. Alden's radio crackled softly at his belt, a reminder of the world outside these cold walls. But neither he nor Saris moved. Only Ace shifted, circling the marked concrete, paws tapping a restless beat, the rhythm of truth trying to break free. "We need authorization," Alden said again, but the words fell lifeless, weighed down by doubt. Saris looked at him, really looked, at the fine tremor in his hand, at the shadow crossing his eyes. He knows, she thought. We both know. Still, rules, protocols, careers built and broken by lines drawn in concrete and caution. Saris knelt beside Ace once more, resting her hand against the cool slab, and for a heartbeat she thought she could feel it, a faint thrum, like a second heartbeat, pulsing from beneath. Ace sat abruptly, posture rigid, gaze boring into hers with a silent plea. "Don't leave me unheard." Saris rose, dust ghosting from her knees. "We wait for the warrant," Alden said. But there was no conviction in his voice now. "No," Saris answered simply, her decision carved in stone. "If there's even a chance someone is down there, they deserve better than another broken promise." Alden hesitated, then gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Saris keyed her radio. "Requesting expedited warrant for excavation at Site B. Probable human remains detection by certified K9. Her voice was steady, her heart anything but. Ace leaned into her side, the contact warm, grounding. Together they faced the forgotten concrete, not as officers bound by fear, but as witnesses refusing to turn away. Beneath their feet, a story waited, ready to be unearthed. The approval came faster than expected, a short, crackling confirmation over the radio. Saris barely breathed as she acknowledged, her gloved fingers tightening around the receiver. Alden called in the forensic team. Within minutes, the cavernous stillness of the warehouse shifted, no longer abandoned but expectant. Portable floodlights buzzed to life, flooding the marked section with harsh, surgical brightness. Ace sat quietly at the perimeter, his body still, but his amber eyes never strayed from the concrete, waiting, guarding. The technician marked the rectangle with quick, precise strokes of orange chalk. Every line another breath drawn into the lungs of a ghost. 6-inch layers, the lead tech instructed. Careful, controlled. The diamond blade saw screamed into life, a jarring, metallic wail that tore the silence apart. Saris flinched, not from fear, but from the sudden violence of it. The blade bit into the concrete, sending white dust spiraling into the beams of light. Every slice felt like peeling back the skin of the earth itself. Minutes stretched, sweat beaded on brows. Even the machine seemed to strain under the weight of unseen memories. 2 inches down, 4. Ace shifted, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. 6 inches. The saw hit something harder, a subtle jolt, a change in pitch. The technician lifted a hand. The machine went silent. Everyone leaned closer. Underneath the broken concrete, a glimpse, dark, wrinkled, out of place, plastic, heavy-duty, construction-grade, warped by time but unmistakable, a layer that didn't belong to the earth. Sarah felt her stomach knot. Alden cursed under his breath. A prayer or a warning, she couldn't tell. They were no longer looking for evidence. They were peeling open a grave, and it was ready to speak. Gloved hands moved with surgical care, pulling at the torn edges of plastic, layer by stubborn layer. The warehouse air thickened, not from dust now, but from something older, raw, human. A smell rose, faint but unmistakable. Sarah stiffened, every instinct screaming in silence. Decomposition. Ace let out a low guttural sound. Not a growl, something deeper, sadder. The plastic gave way, a slow peel, like opening a wound that time itself had tried to seal shut. First came fragments, scraps of stained fabric, warped by moisture and decay. Then something harder, the shape of a hand. Fingers curled unnaturally, reaching for something that would never come. A hush fell across the team, an involuntary holding of breath, as if their lungs refused to draw in the sorrow now leaking into the room. Alden swore under his breath, short, sharp, not anger, grief. The forensic lead raised a hand, signaling to halt. Cameras flashed in controlled bursts, sterile attempts to capture what the heart instinctively recoiled from. It's human, he confirmed grimly, but they didn't need the confirmation. Everyone knew. Sarah crouched beside the site, heart thundering, but hands steady. Ace leaned against her lightly, a silent anchor in the tidal wave of emotion. Among the tattered remains, something glinted under the harsh lights. Metal, dulled by years, but still holding stubborn to its shine. Sarah reached carefully, fingers brushing against a weathered wristwatch. The inscription, though faded, was still legible. To Thomas, 25 years of building dreams. 2008. She closed her eyes for a breath. They had found him, and he had never stopped waiting. The warehouse seemed to breathe now, slow, mournful sighs rising from its hollow chest. No one spoke. No one dared. Sarah cradled the tarnished wristwatch in her gloved hand, the inscription catching shards of the harsh light. To Thomas, 25 years of building dreams. A dream, now entombed in dust and betrayal. Ace leaned closer, his breath warm against her wrist, a reminder that life, however fragile, still persisted. Alden crouched beside her, his voice low, brittle. Thomas Reeves. It has to be. Sarah nodded, the confirmation thickening the grief rather than easing it. But it wasn't just the body they'd found. A forensic tech brushed aside more debris, revealing a weathered, waterproof document pouch tucked against the remains. Inside, scraps of papers, edges curled and darkened by moisture. Financial records, the tech said, voice tight with the weight of understanding. Alden scanned the pages, each line unraveling a deeper rot. Money trails, missing invoices, project discrepancies, signs of something Thomas might have uncovered. Something that had cost him everything. Sarah caught Alden's eye. The same thought pulsed between them. This wasn't random. This was silencing. The realization hit harder than the smell, the dust, the death. It was premeditated, calculated, and someone had gone to great lengths to bury not just a man, but a truth. Ace let out a low, keening whimper, brushing his muzzle against the pouch, as if urging them not to miss what mattered most. Sarah closed her fingers around the documents, a silent vow forming. We will not let him be forgotten. The past had clawed its way to the surface. Now it demanded justice. The warehouse lights flickered, a brief stutter, like the building itself recoiling from the truth now laid bare. Sarah stood, papers clenched tightly in her hand, feeling the weight of more than just damp ink and torn fibers. This was a map of betrayal and murder. Ace shifted beside her, his gaze never leaving the exposed grave. a silent sentinel standing watch over broken promises. Alden leafed through the documents quickly but methodically. Then he froze, fingers pausing on a page where numbers didn't just fail to add up. They screamed. "A shell company," he said grimly. "Funds moved offshore. Weeks before Thomas vanished." Saris leaned in. Names, accounts, transfers. Among the scribbled notes, a name caught her eye. Howard Rohr. The blood in her veins turned to ice. Alden muttered a curse under his breath. The golden boy of Westmere. Reeves's business partner. The one who built an empire after Thomas disappeared. Built it on bones. The realization settled heavy between them. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't a tragic accident. It was calculated. A theft so vast it had swallowed a life whole. Ace whimpered, low, insistent, and nosed another corner of the torn pouch. Saris reached in, pulling out something harder than paper. A flash drive, battered but intact. Hope flickered against the gloom. Proof. Not just hearsay, not just suspicion, cold, hard evidence. Still breathing beneath 12 years of silence. Saris met Alden's eyes. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The flash drive sat heavy in Saris's palm, a shard of truth sharp enough to cut through years of lies. Alden pulled out his field laptop, balancing it on the hood of his car under the dim spill of warehouse lights. The screen flickered, old circuits protesting, then stabilized. They inserted the drive. A folder blinked into existence. Unnamed, untouched for over a decade. Saris's fingers hovered above the trackpad. A moment's hesitation. Once we open it, there's no going back. She clicked. Files spilled across the screen. Financial spreadsheets, construction permits, coded project names, and buried at the bottom, a series of video files, dated, time-stamped. Ace sat at her feet, ears pricking forward as if sensing the air itself changing. Alden opened the first video. A grainy recording crackled to life. Thomas Reeves, sitting at his office desk, speaking into a small camcorder, his voice low, urgent, frayed at the edges. "If you're seeing this, something went wrong." Saris felt her throat tighten. Thomas detailed his suspicions, how he discovered massive funds siphoning through shadow companies, how he confronted his partner, Howard Rohr, how threats followed. "I can't prove it yet," Thomas said, eyes flicking nervously off-screen. "But if I disappear, look at the offshore accounts. Start with Metrocrete." The screen froze. Thomas's face caught in mid-breath, as if even then he knew. He was running out of time. Saris swallowed hard. Proof. Confession. A voice stolen by greed, now echoing back across the years. Alden leaned close, jaw tight. This changes everything." Ace let out a soft whine, pressing against Saris's leg, anchoring her to the moment, to the weight of the truth now too big to ignore. They had a murder to solve, and now, a name to call out. The city lights of Westmere blurred against the SUV windows as they sped toward downtown. A river of gold veins running through a dark body. Saris sat rigid in the passenger seat, fingers drumming a silent, urgent beat against her thigh. Ace rested his head against her lap, sensing the tension, offering silent solidarity. Alden's jaw flexed as he maneuvered through traffic. Eyes hard, voice clipped. "We're not walking into his office empty-handed. The evidence was locked, triple-backed, copies sent ahead to the DA's office. Howard Rohr wouldn't have time to run, but that didn't ease the pressure coiling tight around Saris's ribs. Because men like Rohr didn't build empires without planting traps first. The SUV slid into the underground parking garage of Rohr Development, a gleaming tower of glass and ambition stabbing into the night sky. As they stepped out, the air changed, colder, thinner, like the building itself knew why they had come. A lobby receptionist offered a tight smile, recognizing the badges and the dog, and said nothing. Just buzzed them through. Elevator doors yawned open. Saris caught her reflection in the mirror-polished walls, a woman shaped by duty and something deeper now. Vengeance wrapped in justice. Ding. The doors parted. Howard Roar stood behind his glass desk, a city of stolen dreams glittering behind him, perfectly composed, utterly unsuspecting. Or so he pretended. Ace stiffened at her side. Not aggression, not fear, a different kind of alertness. The kind that said, "There's more here than we see." Saris took one step forward. "This won't take long, Mr. Roar." But deep down she knew. It was only just beginning. Howard Roar's smile was razor sharp, polished, perfect, hollow. "Officers," he greeted, voice smooth as glass. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Saris met his gaze without flinching. "We're reopening the Thomas Reeves investigation." A flicker, almost imperceptible, crossed his features, gone in an instant. He gestured elegantly toward the seating area, as if hosting a casual meeting. "Of course. Anything I can do to help." Ace moved first, stepping between Saris and Alden, body stiff, muscles taut under his black and tan coat. His gaze locked on Roar with an intensity that prickled the skin. Not aggression, recognition. Saris's voice cut clean through the expensive stillness. "We recovered evidence, financial irregularities, offshore accounts, unauthorized property transfers." Each word landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Still, Roar's composure held. "Unfortunate," he said, hands steepled. "But you'll find business, especially construction, often dances on the edge of chaos." Thomas struggled with that. Alden took a step closer. "And yet he never mentioned concerns about you before he disappeared." Roar's eyes narrowed, just for a breath. Then, a smile. Too quick. Too smooth. "Detective, grief invents villains. It's easier to blame the living than accept loss." Saris opened the flash drive in her hand, a silent threat, placed it gently on Roar's gleaming desk. His smile faltered. Ace let out a low, almost imperceptible growl, the kind that comes from a place beyond training, from instinct. Saris leaned in, voice ablade. "We know." For the first time, Roar's mask cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough. And sometimes, that's all it takes. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to hold its breath. Howard Roar leaned back, a calculated move, masking the slight tremor in his hand by adjusting his cufflinks. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost pitying. "You think you've won something here?" He smiled, not warm, predatory. "Evidence means nothing without narrative, without doubt." Saris didn't blink. Neither did Ace. Muscles coiled, eyes locked, a silent read of every fracture in the man's facade. Alden folded his arms across his chest, letting the silence stretch, forcing Roar to fill it. "You'll never convict me," Roar continued, voice sharpening. "You'll be torn apart in court, discredited. This town owes me everything. You think a dead man's old grievances will outweigh what I've built?" The words cracked against the glass walls, loud, ugly, the polished mass slipping with every syllable. Saris watched carefully. Not the words, but the unraveling. There it is, the fear underneath. Ace growled low, just once, deep enough that even Roar flinched. Saris stepped closer, her voice like a scalpel. "This town doesn't owe you. It remembers Thomas Reeves." She dropped a printed photo onto his desk, the tarnished watch, the nameplate, a reminder that some ghosts refuse to stay buried. Roar's hand twitched, tiny, telling. "You should get a lawyer," Alden said quietly. Roar's gaze darted, calculation flickering, and for the first time since they had entered, Saris felt the balance shift. Not enough to claim victory yet, but enough to smell blood in the water. For a second, the room vibrated with something unseen, a shift, deep and sharp, like a crack running down the center of a mirror. Howard Roar's fingers tightened around the armrests of his chair, white-knuckled. The polished charm he wore like armor crumbled. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed, voice low and cutting. "You think uncovering a few scraps of paper makes you righteous?" Saris didn't answer, didn't move. She didn't have to. Truth was a sharper weapon than anything she could draw. Roar stood suddenly, too fast, the chair scraping back with a screech that echoed off the glass walls. Ace reacted instantly, stepping forward, body rigid, teeth bared but silent. One wrong move, one heartbeat too long. "You have no idea what this town would be without me," Roar snapped. "None of you build anything. You just leech. You feed." Alden stayed calm, voice even. "That sounds an awful lot like a man trying to convince himself." Roar's breathing grew heavy, ragged, not fear, fury, and buried beneath that, panic. Ace shifted, reading it perfectly, reading him. Sarah stepped between Roar and her partner, hand hovering near her belt. A silent warning. "Sit down, Mr. Roar," she said, voice steady as stone. For a moment, it seemed like he might listen. But some men, when they feel the walls closing in, don't surrender. They explode. Howard Roar's hand dropped, quick, toward a desk drawer. Ace lunged, and the world snapped into chaos. Howard Roar's hand yanked open the drawer. A flash of silver, cold, deadly. A gun. Time fractured. Alden's shout. Saris lunging forward. Ace, a blur of black and tan muscle. Everything happened in heartbeats, and yet stretched into eternity. Roar brought the weapon up, jaw clenched, eyes wild. But Ace was faster. The German Shepherd hit Roar square in the chest. All momentum, all precision. The impact knocked Roar backward, the gun skidding across the marble floor, spinning into a corner. Roar roared, a sound more animal than man. Grappling with the dog now clamped onto his arm, Saris was there in a flash, pinning Roar's free arm down, adrenaline burning through her veins like wildfire. Alden kicked the weapon away, sliding it safely under a nearby table, then snapped cuffs over Roar's wrist with brutal efficiency. "You're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Reeves," Alden growled, yanking Roar upright. Blood dripped from the torn sleeve of Roar's expensive suit, the savage signature of Ace's intervention. The tycoons sagged in their grip. No more speeches, no more defiance, just a man undone by greed, and a truth he could no longer bury. Saris knelt, hand brushing Ace's ruff, voice soft with fierce gratitude. "Good boy, you saved lives today." Ace pressed against her, chest heaving, eyes bright. Outside, city lights blinked in the darkness, unaware that justice at long last had clawed its way back from the grave. And this time, it wasn't going to be buried again. The sirens arrived minutes later, flashing red and blue across the cold marble of Roar Development's lobby. Paramedics checked Roar's torn arm. Uniformed officers took over custody, reading him his rights in a voice devoid of sympathy. Saris stepped back, pulse still hammering from the confrontation. Ace pressed against her leg, steady as stone, his warmth anchoring her to the moment. Alden stood beside her, silent, watching. Above them, the gleaming skyscraper stretched toward the clouds, a monument to ambition, now crumbling from within. "You okay?" Alden asked, voice rough with unshed adrenaline. Saris nodded. Once, but inside, she wasn't sure. 12 years of silence had ended in violence and blood. Justice had come, but it hadn't come clean, not without scars. Ace sat beside her now, tongue lolling, eyes bright, waiting for her next move as if none of it had been extraordinary. To him, it was just duty, loyalty, love in its purest form. Saris knelt, brushing dust from his coat with trembling hands. "Good boy," she whispered again. Words weighted with something more than praise. Ace nudged her hand gently, a silent forgiveness for all the darkness they'd had to walk through to get here. Alden's radio crackled, breaking the fragile quiet. "We've secured Roar's private residences. Found something you'll want to see." Saris met Alden's gaze. "Not over. Not yet. Some ghosts. They don't stay buried because they weren't ready to rest." She rose slowly, her hand never leaving Ace's fur. "Let's finish this," she said, and together they stepped back into the unknown. The lake house stood silent under a sky bruised with early dawn, glass and stone wrapped in mist. an empty monument to secrets. Saris adjusted her vest as she stepped out of the SUV, Ace tight at her side, ears pricked forward, already sensing what waited inside. Alden met her at the path, flashlight in hand. "They found a hidden room," he said, voice low, grim, "behind the garage." Saris didn't reply, didn't need to. The air itself told her. Something darker was buried here. The team breached the door easily, the old latch snapping with a sharp crack. Inside, darkness. The flashlight beams cut through thick dust, revealing concrete walls, unfinished floors, and in the center, metal shelves, rows of old storage boxes, and something else, tucked carefully behind the crates. Ace whined, deep and uneasy, pulling slightly against the leash. Saris followed his line of sight to a tarp, heavy, stained, motionless. Her breath caught, a cold hand closing around her ribs. A forensic tech moved in, peeling the tarp back carefully. Underneath, bones, human, more than one. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. Not just Thomas, others. Saris staggered back a step, Alden's hand steadying her without words. Ace sat heavily at her feet, gaze unwavering, body tense. 12 years of silence. And it hadn't been one life stolen. It had been a quiet slaughter, hidden behind charity donations, political smiles, golden buildings gleaming under the sun. Saris swallowed hard. The town hadn't just lost a builder. It had harbored a monster, and no one had seen it. Or maybe, no one had dared to. The forensic team moved with grim efficiency, photographing, cataloging, preserving what they could. Saris stood frozen at the threshold. Ace pressed tight against her side, steady but alert. One by one, the remains were uncovered. Fragments of lives, shoes, jewelry, faded scraps of fabric clinging stubbornly to bone. Not just statistics, people. A forensic specialist approached, voice soft, almost apologetic. Preliminary analysis, multiple victims, different ages, different timelines. Saris nodded numbly, her mind reeling. Alden found a stack of water-damaged folders tucked deep into a wall cavity. Records, files on missing persons, photos clipped to aging reports, notes in tight, neat handwriting, victims no one had connected. Until now, she leafed through them. A woman in a nurse's uniform, a young man with a guitar slung over his back, a teenage girl grinning from behind thick glasses. Lives interrupted, neatly filed away. Each face another stone on her chest. Ace nudged her knee gently, pulling her back from the edge of that black sea. Saris closed the file, exhaling slowly. They never had a chance. She looked at Alden, found the same hollow rage mirrored in his eyes. "We need to ID them all," she said, voice steady despite the weight inside it. "We owe them that." Alden nodded once. Not just justice for Thomas Reeves now, but for every soul erased and discarded like broken tools. Saris knelt beside Ace, ruffling his fur. "We'll bring them home," she whispered. Somehow, no matter how long it took. Night pressed heavy against the windows of the command center. The lake house now alive with whispered voices, flashing cameras, and the shuffling of evidence bags. Saris sat at a battered desk, the missing persons files spread before her like a funeral procession. Ace rested at her feet, his breathing slow, steady, the only constant in a world now tilting dangerously under the weight of what they had unearthed. Alden approached, dropping a folder in front of her. Lab results, confirmation. Every set of remains matched an open case. Every name a headline never written. Every face a family that never got to say goodbye. Saris ran a hand over her face, exhaustion carving lines deeper than any clock could measure. "We could go public," Alden said quietly. "Full disclosure. Force the town to reckon with it." Saris stared at the papers, at the faces, at the fragile, brutal truth. Full exposure would bring justice to the dead, but it would also rip Westmere apart. Foundations would crumble, families would break, Legacies built on lies would shatter. She felt Ace's head nudge her knee again, a silent question. Who are we protecting? The answer was obvious. Painful. Necessary. Sarah straightened slowly, gathering the files with hands that no longer trembled. We bring it all out, she said. No mercy, no half measures. The dead deserved to be seen. And the living. The living deserved to know exactly who they'd been kneeling to, no matter what it cost. Ace rose beside her, ready as always. Together they would finish what they had started. No more silence, no more shadows. The press conference was hastily arranged. Rows of microphones, cameras, and expectant faces jammed into the city courthouse lobby. Westmere, so long asleep, now wide awake. Sarah stood behind the podium, the weight of dozens of names pressing against her chest. Ace sat at her side, a silent anchor, his black and tan coat almost gleaming under the harsh lights. Alden flanked her, file folder in hand, jaw tight, eyes unflinching. The mayor sat rigid in the front row, face pale, knuckles white where they gripped the chair. Sarah gripped the edge of the podium, grounding herself, then spoke. Today we confirmed that Thomas Reeves was not the only victim. The room rippled, reporters leaning forward, pens flying across notepads, cameras flashing. We have recovered evidence of multiple homicides spanning over a decade, evidence concealed by those entrusted with this town's growth and safety. A collective gasp, a murmur swelling into a low roar. She kept going, voice steady, slicing through the noise. Howard Rohr has been formally charged. We will pursue every lead, every name, every shadow. Somewhere in the back, a woman sobbed. Somewhere else, a man cursed under his breath. Sarah didn't flinch, because the truth, once freed, demands to be heard. Ace shifted beside her, sensing the tide of emotion, the crackling fury just beneath the surface. She rested her hand lightly on his head, a signal, a vow. They had torn the rot out by its roots, but the cost was just beginning to be counted, and not everyone in Westmere would forgive them for it. Days later, the sun finally broke through the heavy gray that had blanketed Westmere. Sarah walked the path behind the precinct, Ace trotting at her side. No crowds, no reporters, just the soft crush of fallen leaves underfoot. Justice had come, but healing, that would take longer. A new memorial had been raised near the station. Simple, solemn. Names etched in stone, names that would never be forgotten again. Sarah paused in front of it, running her fingers lightly over the cool granite, each letter carved with finality and a strange kind of hope. Ace sat beside her, head tilted, sensing the gravity of the moment. She smiled, a small, weary smile, and knelt to press her forehead against his. You found them, she whispered. You brought them home. The town would rebuild. Some wounds would close. Others would always ache. But the silence was broken now, and sometimes breaking the silence is the bravest thing anyone can do. Sarah stood, feeling the crisp wind sweep through her hair. Ace gave a short, proud bark, as if claiming this moment for all those who no longer could. And as they walked back toward the station, the weight didn't vanish, but it became something they could carry, together. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Which part struck you the most? And if you believe in stories of loyalty, courage, and never giving up, feel free to subscribe and join our journey. No pressure, just heart. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. Life lessons from this story. There are moments in life when silence feels safer than truth, when looking away seems easier than facing what hurts. But every hidden wrong, every unspoken story leaves scars, not just on the victims, but on the soul of a community. Saris and Ace reminded us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet step forward, a refusal to let the forgotten remain forgotten. Justice isn't perfect. It's messy. It hurts. It demands sacrifice. But it's also healing, even if that healing comes slow, even if it comes through grief. The light we find after a long darkness isn't just about solving a case or catching the guilty. It's about honoring the lives that mattered, the voices that deserve to be heard. And maybe that's the real victory, not in erasing the past, but in refusing to let it be erased. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe, like we do, that every voice, every life, deserves to be seen and remembered, feel free to subscribe and walk this journey with us. No pressure, just heart. Woof.